Welcome back to another episode of Locked In. Tonight, me and Rev are going to break down what all is happening at Alabama. And then, to be honest, in my opinion, it's a pretty sleazy situation, is I guess how you would put it in my humble opinion. So with Ryan Grubb leaving Alabama, I think it's just really not so much. Uh, I think it's dishonest is the word I'd go with. It's just very dishonest with how that whole situation took place. Because you got this guy here that is the offensive coordinator at Washington last year, who did a spectacular job with Penix and everybody there on the offense. And he knows how to run an offense. I mean, they looked wonderful last year and made it to the national championship because of their offense and the way it played. And you have him saying, "Hey, this guy's the next offensive coordinator at Alabama." I mean, he was never actually hired as the next offensive coordinator at Alabama, but they were going to act like he was. And I just think that's really dishonest to all the players out there because you're recruiting all these guys saying, "Hey, this guy's going to be your next offensive coordinator." So I mean, I just really don't like that, and you also keep kids out of the portal by doing that. So I mean, they really just it was really a slimy way to help them out next year by keeping kids, and also their Alabama's director of athletics went on record saying that that after he left, that they had a plan in motion for if he left for the specific job at the Chargers. So I mean, they knew he was going to leave. He was never actually hired, and they already had a plan in place for when he left. They just wanted the reality to seem something different so they could keep players there. What do you have to say about this, Rev?
So, I guess the first thing is some people might combat the idea that he was never hired as the OC because he was on the recruiting trail. Um, it is documented now at this point that he was never officially unveiled as the offensive coordinator. He introduced himself to the Red Elephant Club as the new offensive coordinator, and he also did recruit for DeBoer during his very short time at Alabama. But they never officially made it so, and they assuming they did that because he was already being signed on as the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator. And obviously, kind of what Chance was talking about with the AD having a contingency plan. I think that you can look at that two ways. You have the more probably like realism, cynical view of well, they did that because they knew he was going to leave, so they already had to have one in place. And then you have the other view of it, which is well, we have a guy who's highly sought after. There's still a big coaching carousel going on all over the place across the country, as we've seen with Chip Kelly and Bill O'Brien and the Ryan Day stuff with Ohio State, and obviously he's still there, but hiring a USC. So lots of coaching weirdness. We got to make sure that we have contingencies in case we lose our guy, which is fair enough. I think probably all major universities that have coaches that would be attractive as head coaches somewhere else, or maybe NFL coaches, they have to have contingencies made. So I feel like you would do that anyway, but it does feel. I guess it adds more fuel to the fire of the situation, which is they definitely had some idea this was going on. What level of idea they had, that's all speculation one way or the other. I kind of err on the same side as Chance does and that many others do. Is at the very least, it's all very shady, right? He introduces himself as a USC, but he's never officially announced as it. That is shady just by itself. And then obviously you have him announcing that he's the new offensive coordinator for Seattle after the transfer window is gone for Alabama players for the head coaching transfer window, which if you don't know, most of you probably do. When your head coach leaves, you get a 30-day transfer window of just your team, whether you want to stay or go because your head coach leaves. That does not apply to offense coordinators or position coaches. So head coach leaves, timer starts. New head coach is gotten, timer is still going on, and then you have all of your position coaches and coordinators from the old or the new, the shifting around that occurs when regime changes for teams. What the position coaches do or coordinators do has no bearing on that timeline. It just starts when the head coach leaves. And then it ends after that 30 days. That's the only thing that it changes. So him coming in, making a degree of stability. Obviously, there was some bleeding with Alabama and their roster. They had a lot of transfers headed out, a lot of big time players, guys who are going to be key contributors going into next season. You can tell me that's not true, but I know it is because I saw them play this year. So they wanted to stop the bleeding, show some normalcy, like show we have things under control. Grubb is the OC. He came over here with me. He has great success. You know, trust this guy. He even goes recruiting to kind of cement that a little bit further. And then as soon as that window's up, and hey, we got our guys here at least for another 2 months, he can go, and he does. And I mean, to give a little bit more, I guess it's not as bad as it might seem. This could have been done, I guess, in a worse way or with worse timing. But for the Alabama players, they obviously still have the second transfer portal window, which is in April, so they don't have to wait too long. And then when the coaching, as far as the timing of it all, uh, classes have already started for the spring semester for universities. So it's not like that the guys who would transfer, if this hadn't happened this way and Grubb had left immediately, if there were some knee jerk reaction transfers, that's fair enough. But they still have to wait to enroll into this in the summer because classes already started. Now, like there's obviously a lot of stuff that goes all around that, so it's not quite as egregious as it appears initially, but it's still, again, as Chance said, and as many others have talked about, that's pretty shady, and it just, I guess, it sets a bad precedent for future stuff like this. And obviously, Alabama, high profile, it's one of the biggest brands in all college football, if not the biggest. Everybody's watching it, especially with Saban retiring. So this just puts a bigger microscope on the situation. And I think that whether for good of players or bad of players, good of the sport, bad of the sport, I expect that you will see ramifications for this move going forward by the NCAA or whoever ends up, making decisions now for college football. I expect there to be some dominoes falling because of this.
Yeah, I think that you could also see just possible ramifications. Not exactly for Alabama in that sense, but for all of college football, I guess you'd say, based upon, it really hurting the kids. They made NIL to benefit the player. Well, if you're trying to benefit the player, you also need to have it available where, hey, some kids OC leaves, maybe you have offensive players able to leave, or a position coach leaves. Maybe you have position able to leave. So I mean, I think there will be some rules shifted around, and that's just saying if they don't go to like a mini NFL league
Mm.
where it's just all salary capped and it don't matter. It's free agency and you're signed to a contract. You never know, but right now, I know that there's no ramifications that'll happen to Alabama. It's just very very slimy the way they did it. Could probably have a bad outlook for future players and maybe some on the team now that might transfer out when the new window comes open in about the end of April. So, I just wanted to point that out because not many people are talking about it.
Yeah, I think the ramifications against Alabama, they're not going to be any kind of official ones. If you see any, it will be on the recruiting trail, and it will be in that new transfer portal window when April opens up. So you'll have, if it's as big of a deal as it, I guess, possibly could be, and let's say that there was just no transparency from the coaches to the players, and they were completely blindsided by this, which obviously, fair enough, that would make you angry if you're a player. And if it's at that point and it's at that level, then you probably will see some bigger time players, or especially on the offensive side of the ball, uh, get upset and want to leave because they were lied to, or just maybe not told the whole truth. And then you have the other side of it too with recruits, because I feel like if if this is how it went down, what kind of what we're posing with it being like very shady and not transparent among the players and coaches, with those recruits who are looking at this, that goes a long way in breaking trust to a program that has had trust for over 15 years. I mean, probably 15, 16 years with Saban at the helm. He was there for 17. After the first bad year, they were great and they maintained greatness. And I think there was always a reliability when it came to when Saban or his recruiters walked through the door. You knew what you were getting and you knew what you could expect. And I think all of a sudden you're looking at this and say, okay, we had a new regime come in, and the first thing that they do is they have a whole shady situation with coaching, hired, not hired, um, and that just it leaves a sour taste not only in your current roster mouth but also future prospects. So you could definitely have some people looking at this and saying, "Well, I don't want to go play there because I don't know what's going to happen, and they're not going to tell me." Which I mean, that's pretty common among plenty of universities. Is a lot of the times the players don't get told until it's out on social media or until the last possible moment. And that's kind of the nature of the beast, I guess. But this one is publicized, and this is obviously one that, while not a ton of people are talking about it, it's still going to be noticed by the recruits who were affected by it, because obviously DeBoer and Grubb were on the recruiting trail for offensive guys. And then, of course, I guess the only other thing to mention with this is another new offensive coordinator for Alabama. So Grubb had been with DeBoer, had a lot of success, and I would say he had a lot more say with the offense. DeBoer's an offensive guy, and that's his main thing that he calls and is very instrumental in. But Grubb had a big part in their success. Quarterbacks coach OC. With him being gone, the new offensive coordinator is now Nick Sheridan, which was the former Washington tight ends coach. He had a stint at offensive coordinator, a couple different stops. I believe he had one in South Florida before he was fired there, like in 2013. And then I know that he spent some time at Indiana, and then he was hired at Washington a little bit later by DeBoer. So DeBoer has some years with this guy. He trusts him, but I would go so far to say that DeBoer is going to have more control. I mean, he always had control, but more input on this now with Grubb not being there. I'm sure that Nick Sheridan will have plenty to say and plenty to do, but I would say this is more of just DeBoer's offense now with Grubb being gone.
Yeah, DeBoer is actually gonna be calling the offense this year. So, I mean, I think that's a hard task to take upon yourself because, I mean, look at Ron Day over in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. I mean, he literally hired Chip Kelly and Bill O'Brien at one point to take over play calling because he realized it was too much to do to win. So, I mean, I think you put yourself in a position at that point, especially at Alabama. And, something else that, you don't really think of when you hear this news is that all these people that saying, hey, Milrow will be fine in the offense because you got a great quarterbacks coach like Ron Grubb there to help him out and help him to transition in the offense and learn. It's like that dude is gone now. It's like who's helping Jalen Milrow, who is supposed to be the starter, or even Ty Simpson or Dylan Lonergan. I mean, at this point, you have to think that Austin Mack he has a leg up more than he did before, especially with this quarterback coaching change. So I mean, I think there's a lot of validity already in that, and that storyline is just going to keep getting bigger.
Yeah. So with Sheridan as the new OC and new quarterbacks coach, he was a QB coach at Indiana in 2017. He swapped over to tight ends when Kalen DeBoer showed up at Indiana, and then he was named the offensive coordinator quarterbacks coach for 2020 after DeBoer left to go to Fresno State to be the head coach. And then he was terminated by Indiana in 21 and then was hired by Washington just like 2 weeks later. So he has had some QB coach experience. Obviously, he's had plenty of tight ends experience as well. He's had experience under this offense with DeBoer. But talking about the quarterback situation, I don't know how much is going to change the narrative of it all, but just using, I guess, Grubb as the, hey, he's a great QB coach. He's going to be able to get Milrow to do exactly what they needed him to do in the offense. Well, he's not there now. So is DeBoer / Nick Sheridan, whose job is, positioned as quarterback coach, are they going to be able to have, or is he specifically going to have the same impact on Milrow to get him adjusted to this offense the way that they want him? Who knows? Maybe he will. And again, that conversation with the Alabama quarterback, I know it's a topic that people get pretty frustrated at, but it's a fair topic to discuss because you don't know with new coaches, new regimes, new styles, all that kind of hitting one another. There's a conversation there as we continue on and we see spring ball and fall camp, all that kind of stuff, to see what shakes out as far as the depth chart and who's where. Again, I fully expect Milrow to be leading the charge for it. But I do think that Austin Mack is going to make a case for himself and be right on the heels of him. So this is all just a very interesting situation. You expected this when the greatest of all time steps down from his head coaching position. Clearly, there's going to be ramifications. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of what ifs and unknowns because this guy has been a known commodity. He's been the coach for 17 years at one place, which isn't really done anymore. And the the fallout from him leaving was going to be somewhat big. There's no, it doesn't matter who you bring in to stop the bleeding. There was going to be bleeding just based on who he was and what he had done. There's nobody that has the resume that he does. I mean, the closest one is Kirby Smart, and it's not even close. So all that being said, this is always a fascinating topic. It has been very, very interesting to watch the goings on at Alabama with all of the new changes. And I'm pretty sure it'll continue to be fascinating as we get through to the opening of the 24 season.
Yeah. So a lot of questions at Alabama. We'll know more in spring. So, with that being said, we'll keep to cover this. Everybody stay locked in.